So when we were finally done with our little excursion to the island to see the puffins at the puffin viewing site, when we came out, it was a beautiful day and there were people heading in. And one of the people that was heading in asked, simple question, were there any puffins there today? I couldn't answer. I was literally speechless. I couldn't simply say, yes, there were puffins. I was trying to say so many things because my mind was just racing from what I had just experienced. Elliston, Newfoundland is really close to the town of Bonavista, towards the northern tip of the Bonavista Peninsula. It is a small town in its own right, but it's really raised its own profile over the past probably about 30 years or so. So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to talk about Elliston. Elliston is actually one of the highlights of the whole Bonavista Peninsula, and the Bonavista Peninsula is just so rich with so many great things, right? I'm actually going to create a separate video talking about the other aspects of the peninsula. Maybe I'll touch on Elliston in that one, but the peninsula is one of my favorite regions of the whole province, and Elliston is one of the unsung heroes that makes the peninsula such a gem, right? Elliston is known as the root cellar capital of the world. If you don't see root cellars, if you just read it, or if someone just tells you, yeah, there's a lot of root cellars in Elliston, you're kind of like, okay, cool, it sounds exciting. But they actually are really cool, so you have to see them to understand that. Root cellars preceded fridges, refrigerators, and the purpose was, as the name implies, to keep your root vegetables fresh through the long winter months by keeping them protected from the elements, and even in the summer they keep a cooler temperature than outside, so you can maintain your root vegetables, which were super important, still are to this day in Newfoundland, where soil isn't really amenable to farming a lot of different crops, but root vegetables, potatoes, carrots, turnips, things like that, there's no problem growing them in Newfoundland whatsoever. It's actually a great environment for these particular vegetables. So root cellars are a big part of Newfoundland culture, Newfoundland history. And in Elliston, a few decades ago, there were a number of root cellars sort of still in existence, and the Elliston Heritage Society decided to get behind them and refurbish them. And that has led to unexpected consequences of some of the busiest tourism numbers that Newfoundland enjoys anywhere. So I saw some of the root cellars, and I went in. You actually can open the door and peer in. It is pretty cool. If you go, you make your way all the way out there, peek your head in and just see what is inside a root cellar. It's just sort of stone structure. Nothing to talk about. It isn't spectacular, but to see it is actually pretty cool. But just seeing them from the outside, it just kind of looks like hobbit houses. They're cute and they're kind of mysterious, and you have to wonder, just by looking at them, what exactly is inside. When you know what they are, the mystery kind of goes away, of course, but it's still cool to know how important they were to the heritage and culture of Newfoundland for centuries. Now, of course, we're going to talk about puffins, but I wanted to mention the root cellars first because they do play a major role in Elliston's emergence as a tourism destination in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. But before we get to the puffins, I also just want to touch very briefly on some of the other things around that are really important. So the sealing industry in Newfoundland played a really important role in our history. There were two events related to the sealing industry in Newfoundland in 1914. On March 30th and 31st that took place, that resulted in the loss of 251 lives. And in Elliston, a major sealing town, they have a beautiful memorial set up to commemorate the lives lost. In particular, two lives, Reuben and Albert John Crew. The story is very detailed, but just to quickly highlight these two men, they were a father and son duo that were out on the ice, and they perished, and as the story goes, holding each other, and the memorial statue that's there in Elliston reflects apparently how the two men were actually found frozen solid. That's the Sealers Memorial statue, but there's also an interpretation center in the town of Elliston that it's basically a museum, and there's artifacts and some videos playing that explain what actually happened, particularly in 1914, but other years as well. There's a lot of disasters that have happened in the sealing industry in Newfoundland over the years, but it's a really interesting place. Now, I tend to not pull my camera out inside museums anymore. Just don't quite feel like that's the right thing to do, but at least by telling you that it's there, you can go and experience it for yourself, learn a little bit more about Newfoundland history by way of the sealing history of the province. Now, moving on to brighter sides of Newfoundland history, of course, living on the ocean, we have beaches. There's a beautiful beach in Elliston. It's called Sandy Cove Beach. There's a few sandy coves around the province, or at least around the island, that I'm aware of. But this Sandy Cove Beach in Elliston, it's reasonably small, but it is popular when it's summertime. Of course, you can actually get in the water there. It's a little cool, as it always is around the North Atlantic on the beaches, but you can get in the water. And the beach is actually just on the way up the hill towards the Puffin viewing site, so you can hang out at the beach for a little while and then make your way up to the Puffin viewing site after, or vice versa. Of course, it's basically right there, like right next to where you need to go to park your vehicle to take that short little hike out to see the puffins. As I mentioned, Elliston is close to the tip of the Bonavista Peninsula. It's like, 10 kilometers from the town of Bonavista itself. Bonavista being the major service area of at least the northern end of the peninsula. But Elliston is one of many beautiful stops along the way. So as I said, I'm going to create a separate video talking about Bonavista at large. But just, a few of the highlights along your drive to get up towards Elliston will be coming through the towns of Trinity and Port Rexton. There's the Skirwing Trail, which actually links you to Trinity East. Heading up from Port Rexton, you can pop into Champneys West. There's Champneys East, Champneys West. Champneys West is one of my favorite sort of road stops because they just have a really cool looking fishing stage area where it's functional, but it's definitely geared up to tourism a little bit just because of the bright colors on the stages themselves. Heading further up, you will pass through the historic town of Port Union. Heading north from Port Union, you're getting closer to the town of Bonavista. Spend some time in Bonavista. It's one of the larger outport towns in the province of Newfoundland, and it has a very, very rich history that is a little unique in that there was no great fires that wiped the town out. So there's actual built heritage in the town that goes back centuries. It's some of the oldest houses and structures like that still exist in the province because so many of the other larger towns were literally destroyed by fire over the years. If you head through Bonavista, you can make it up to the very tip of the peninsula at Cape Bonavista, where the lighthouse is, another beautiful stop. But if you work your way back towards Elliston, you'll come across the amazing Dungeon Provincial Park and Spiller's Cove, two coastal areas that are parks in their own right, that are just like naturally occurring wonders that I just love to lay my eyes on. So that's on your way back from the Cape Bonavista, where the lighthouse is, heading back towards Elliston. These are some of the things that you can explore through the Bonavista Peninsula. I'm not trying to tease you with the puffins. We're going to get to them very soon, but I hope you're able to experience some of the other things that you can experience on the Bonavista Peninsula as long as you know about them. All right, so we've covered kind of a lot of material here. It's just really, quick notes and just introducing some of these other places. I'm going to spend a little bit more time to talk about the puffins here, though, because they deserve some serious attention. So the Puffin viewing site, that's actually, I believe the signage, that's what I call it. I don't think there's any specific name on it, but the Puffin viewing site is in the town of Elliston, and it's just past Sandy Cove Beach, as I mentioned earlier. And there's plenty of parking. I don't know how busy it can get. I took my mom and dad for a visit there one time in the middle of the summer on a beautiful day, and there was a lot of people around, but there was ample parking. And you need parking. You need to drive. It'll be pretty hard to reach this place without a vehicle, so that's why I want to stress parking here. But there was no issue with parking. There seemed to be plenty. So when you park your car, there is a little bit of a hike to get to the Puffin viewing site. Now, it's not much of a hike, but unfortunately, that particular day, my mom's leg was really acting up. She had a problem with her leg, and she actually stayed in the car while me and my dad took the hike in to see the puffins. I say hike, and please understand, it's pretty flat, but there are a few areas that get a little choppy where there's actually like rails so that you don't get vertigo and fall off a cliff. Like, it's not a particularly difficult hike, but just, be aware it's not a place to probably bring pets. Definitely not a place to bring pets, but not a place to bring little kids either. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking, actually. I'm happy to say that just the other day, my brother took my mom and dad back to Elliston, and they went out, and mom's feeling better, thankfully, so my brother took her and my dad out to the puffin site, and they actually were able to make the walk, so she actually got to see some puffins in 2024, so it's all good. The little hike out, we're talking 5 or 10 minutes. I don't remember it being long, but it's just something to be mindful of. It's relatively uneven ground because it's not like a paved walkway or anything, but definitely a scenic little short walk. But the real main event is when you get to the end of the hike, and you know when you're there as soon as you get there, especially if it's a busy day with a lot of people around, because there's not a lot of activity because people are standing like statues, dumbfounded, looking at the scenery. So there is an island just beyond the Puffin viewing site that you can't access. There's no bridge or anything, and that's where the majority, I understand, of the puffin nests are. But the puffins come over to the side of the land where the actual viewing site is, and they are not shy at all. They'll come up very close to you. Please don't get too close to them. This is nature, so take care when you're on the site. But you can get pretty close to them and get great photos and video in great detail, and they're not really afraid of you. So be mindful. It is wildlife. You want to be careful, but you can also take advantage of the proximity, the very close proximity with puffins here that you can't get many, if any, other places around the world. So the ideal time to go to the viewing site to actually see the puffins, they say it's a pretty wide window from late May to early September. The prime season would be more like mid to late June through mid-August. For a lot of people, the most exciting reason to show up at this particular time is because the bright colors of the puffins' beaks, that's the prime time for that. It's related, the colors of the beaks are related to hormones in the birds, so it's believed that that plays a role in mating, like it does for a lot of other animals. Come during this breeding season window to see the puffins at their brightest, at their most colorful, right? So if you're going to go to Elliston to see the puffins, you're going to a place that's probably, if not the most accessible puffin viewing location in the world. It's definitely top 2 or 3. So you're going to treat yourself to something that you can't find really anywhere else in the world. It's recommended to bring binoculars, but on some days you don't even need them. You can get up literally within an arm's reach from a puffin, and please do not get closer than that. They are wildlife and they don't want to be touched. Please don't feed them any of that. But you can get, my point is, you can get so close that you literally could touch them. So binoculars may be appropriate sometimes, but other times they're just not even needed. So Elliston is the root cellar capital of the world, and if you take that in a vacuum and don't really think much about it, it doesn't sound very interesting. But once you see a root cellar, it's like, okay, this is why they cling to that claim to fame. But on top of the root cellars, there's the whole history of the Newfoundland sealing industry that is commemorated by the town. There's a beautiful beach. There's beautiful towns all around Elliston on the Bonavista Peninsula. So there's many, many reasons to head to Elliston for a weekend getaway or whatever you can do. If you live in St. John's, you can do a day trip to Elliston, no problem. But the crown jewel, the cherry on top of the beautiful cake that is the Bonavista Peninsula, has to be the puffins, specifically in the peak summer months. And if that's the only thing that you're going to travel to Elliston for, you won't be disappointed. It's remarkable, and I can't think of many other things that I've experienced in my life that left me literally speechless like this has. But there's lots of other really cool things that you can see in Newfoundland related to wildlife or just nature. So if you haven't seen it yet, I would actually invite you to come join me in this video over here next, where I head to the southern shore, another beautiful region of the province, where we saw some more puffins, but the main event of that video is the whales that we danced with for about a half an hour on a not so beautiful summer day. Hopefully I'll see you over there next. All right, take care.